In a quiet, picturesque village, there lived a young girl named F, whose beauty and kindness made her the pride of her community. As the only child of her parents, she was cherished by all, with villagers often comparing her gentle nature to the soft caress of the morning breeze. But F wasn't just known for her warmth. She possessed a sharp mind and a deep love for learning. Year after year, she returned home from school with top honors, her arms full of prestigious awards. The entire village celebrated her achievements, and her parents' faces glowed with pride each time she held up another prize. However, F's life took a devastating turn when she grew older. A group of youth corpers, Val, Kunle, Dio, and Faye, arrived in the village for their service. What initially started as a simple friendship between them and F took a horrifying turn when they betrayed her trust in the worst possible way. They took advantage of her, all of them at once, never realizing that F was no ordinary girl. What happened next, no one could have foreseen. F had always been a girl with big dreams. She often told her parents, "Mama, Papa, when I grow up, I want to be a banker. I want to move to the city, wear beautiful clothes, and work in a grand office with many people." Her parents would always nod with encouragement and say, "Yes, my child, you will achieve great things. Keep studying, and all your dreams will come true." Her life was filled with hope and ambition. She believed that nothing could stand in her way of becoming the successful banker she had always aspired to be. But what no one knew was that her bright future was about to be overshadowed by a tragedy that would change everything forever. One sunny afternoon, as F sat outside, lost in thoughts of her future, the unthinkable happened. Her parents had gone to a neighboring village for a short visit, but on their way back, they were involved in a fatal accident. Neither of them survived. Just like that, F's world crumbled before her eyes. When the news reached the village, shock and sorrow spread. Like wildfire, the entire community came together to mourn. A proper burial was held, with prayers, songs, and support pouring in from every direction. But no amount of comfort could mend F's shattered heart. She cried endlessly, and the grief consumed her, so deeply that school became the last thing on her mind. Once the brightest student in her class, F now struggled to focus. The girl who once brought home awards could barely pay attention in class. She would stare blankly at her books, her mind clouded with sorrow. Her teachers saw her suffering and chose not to scold her. They understood her pain and didn't want to make things harder for her. But F herself felt lost. The dream that once burned so brightly within her now seemed like a distant memory. Life felt hollow, and sadness filled every corner of her soul. But her hardships were far from over. Soon, she would find herself entangled in an adult world she never planned for. Though she managed to move on to secondary school, nothing was the same. Her grades plummeted. The girl who once topped every exam now found it difficult to keep up. She lost all motivation, but in her village, education was a must. Dropping out would bring disgrace, even though her parents were no longer there to push her forward. Every day, F went to school, but her heart was not in it. She sat in class, barely listening. Her eyes, filled with tears, made the words on the pages blur. She often withdrew from her classmates, preferring solitude. She missed her parents terribly, and the dreams of becoming a banker felt unreachable, like a balloon drifting far beyond her grasp. How can I ever go to the city and fulfill my dreams without my parents? She often wondered. Who will be proud? Of me now? What's the point of studying anymore? These painful thoughts haunted her, making life feel meaningless. But regardless of how lost she felt, she had no choice but to keep attending school, even when it felt unbearable, even when it seemed pointless. What she didn't know was that another unexpected twist awaited her. A change was coming that would alter her life in ways she couldn't predict. One bright morning, as F walked into school, she noticed something unusual. The classroom was adorned with colorful paper and ribbons. The air buzzed with excitement. Her classmates whispered and laughed among themselves, their eyes filled with anticipation. F sat quietly at her desk, confused. Suddenly, a friend leaned over and whispered, "Didn't you hear? The old teachers are leaving, and new teachers, youth corpers, are coming to teach us." The entire class was thrilled. Unlike the strict teachers they had before, the corpers were young, lively, and full of energy. The students couldn't wait to meet them. When the new teachers arrived, they were enthusiastic, smiling warmly, and asking plenty of questions. They made learning fun, and the students eagerly participated, all vying for their attention. Hands shot up in the air as they competed to answer questions, each one hoping to be noticed. But F remained silent. While the classroom buzzed with excitement, she sat still, lost in her own sorrow. No matter how engaging or cheerful the new teachers were, it couldn't erase the emptiness she felt inside. Yet, unbeknownst to her, something was about to happen, something that would catch the eye of one of the new teachers and pull F into yet another chapter of her life, one she never expected. Cal was one of the newest teachers at the school, assigned to teach F's class. He was young, full of energy, and always had a bright smile on his face. Every day, he taught his students with enthusiasm, making learning exciting and engaging. But soon, he noticed something unusual about Faye. Unlike the rest of the students who eagerly participated in class, she remained silent. She never raised her hand, never answered questions. While others were full of life, Faye sat quietly, staring at her books with empty, distant eyes. One day, Cal decided to call on her. He asked a simple question, hoping to encourage her participation. But Faye froze. Her mind went blank, and she sat there, unable to speak. The class erupted in laughter. "She's the dumbest in the class," one student shouted, making the others laugh even harder. Faye's face turned bright red with humiliation. Tears welled up in her eyes, and before she could stop them, they spilled over. Cal's heart sank. He quickly silenced the class and let her be. After the lesson ended, he gently asked her to stay behind. With kind, understanding eyes, he softly spoke. "Faye, why do you always stay so quiet? Why don't you speak in class?" Faye hesitated at first, but after a moment, she slowly opened up. She shared her painful past, the accident, the loss of her parents, and how all her dreams had shattered since that tragic day. Her voice trembled as she spoke, tears falling freely. Cal was deeply moved. Looking at her with compassion, he said, "Faye, I'm so sorry for everything you've been through, but you are still the brilliant girl you once were. You can rise again, and I will help you." Faye wiped her tears as Cal promised to support her. What she didn't know was that his kindness would lead her down a path she never expected. From that day on, Faye began visiting Cal's house for extra lessons. He patiently sat with her, helping her catch up on everything she had missed. Slowly but surely, Faye started improving. She began answering questions in class again, and the sadness that had once surrounded her started to fade. Cal was always encouraging, always reminding her, "You can do it, Faye. You're smart. Just keep trying." As her confidence grew, Faye began sharing her dreams with him. One evening, while they were studying, she looked up and said, "Cal, I still want to go to the city. I still want to become a banker, even though life has been hard." Cal smiled and nodded. "You will, Faye. You're strong. If you keep working hard, you'll achieve your dreams. Just stay focused on your studies for now." But Cal didn't just help her with school. He supported her in other ways too. Knowing she was struggling, he would sometimes bring her food. He even gave her small amounts of money to help with her needs. For the first time in a long time, Faye felt safe. Slowly, she started to heal. She began to smile again. Maybe her dreams weren't completely lost after all. While Cal was busy helping Faye rebuild her confidence, some of the other male teachers began to notice her too. They saw her beauty, how well she carried herself, and how often she visited Cal's house. Soon, whispers spread among them. "She's a beautiful girl," one of them said. "Cal spends a lot of time with her. Maybe we should have some fun too," another added with a smirk. "Yes," someone else agreed. "She's always going to his house. Who knows what they're doing behind closed doors? Maybe he's already enjoying her." That night, they decided to confront Cal. As he stood outside his house, they approached him. One of them stepped forward with a sly grin. "Cal, we've noticed that girl, Faye. She's beautiful. And she's always coming to your place. Why don't you share her with us? We just want a taste, just once." Cal's entire body tensed. His face darkened with anger. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice rising. "Oh, come on, Cal. Don't act innocent," one of them sneered. "Why else would she be at your place so often? We know you're pretending. We just want a turn." Cal clenched his fists, taking a deep breath to steady himself. Then, with a voice filled with fury, he roared, "I said no! You will leave her alone. She has already suffered enough, and I will not let you harm her." The other men sneered, laughing among themselves. They believed Cal was lying, that he was secretly enjoying Faye's company and just didn't want to share. But they were wrong. Unlike them, Cal truly cared for Faye. He saw her as a little sister who needed protection, not as an object of pleasure. And as he watched the men walk away, still laughing, he made a silent promise to himself. No matter what, he would keep her safe. Cooper Val's heart felt heavier with each passing day. He knew the men around him were dangerous, and the thought of what they might attempt filled him with unease. His biggest concern was protecting F, but deep down, he feared that he couldn't hold back their dark intentions forever. From that moment on, he kept an even closer eye on her, unaware that danger was already creeping closer. The other Corpers had no intention of abandoning their sinister plans. They had set their sights on F, and nothing would stop them until they got what they wanted. One quiet afternoon, F made her way to Cooper Val's house for her usual lesson. With her books in hand, she was eager to learn something new. She knocked on the door, expecting to see Val, but instead, his friends, the other male Corpers, answered. They greeted her with warm smiles, masking their true intentions. Val stepped out to buy something, one of them said. "Come inside and wait for him." F trusted them. They were Val's friends, and she had no reason to believe they would treat her any differently than he did. Without a second thought, she stepped inside, completely unaware of the horror awaiting her. The moment she sat down, everything changed. Kunle, Femi, and Du emerged from another room, closing the door behind them. Their friendly smiles twisted into something dark and sinister. Before F could process what was happening, they grabbed her. She tried to scream, but fear locked her voice inside her throat. They surrounded her, overpowering her with no escape. One by one, they forced themselves upon her, ignoring her desperate cries for help. When they were done, they left her there, broken, bruised, and alone. Their laughter echoed as they walked away, indifferent to the agony they had inflicted. F lay on the floor, paralyzed by pain and betrayal. Tears streamed down her face as her world collapsed around her. The weight of what had happened crushed her spirit. She had trusted them, and they had stolen everything from her. The once familiar house now felt like a prison of nightmares. Cooper Val wasn't there to protect her. He had been called away for an emergency and had to leave the village urgently, completely unaware of the horror unfolding in his absence. Meanwhile, Kunle, Femi, and Du believed they had gotten away with their monstrous crime. But what they didn't know was that their actions would soon bring consequences far beyond their imagination. After the assault, F's life spiraled into darkness. The pain in her body was unbearable, but the wounds in her heart hurt even more. Every day she drowned in sorrow, feeling smaller and more broken with each passing moment. Fear and shame consumed her, stealing her voice and her strength. But just when she thought things couldn't get any worse, the village turned against her. Whispers began spreading like wildfire. Some girls, envious of F's closeness to Cooper Val, started malicious rumors. "She's been with all the male corpers," they gossiped. "That's why she always visits their house." The lies spread faster than the truth. Soon, everywhere F went, people pointed at her, shaking their heads in disapproval. She felt their judgment in every glance, heard the murmurs behind her back. The girl they once admired was now the subject of cruel gossip, her reputation shattered by twisted words. The shame was unbearable. F could no longer endure the looks, the whispers, the suffocating weight of their false accusations. Desperate to escape, she packed her belongings and fled the village. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't stay. She couldn't face the people who had turned against her, the ones who believed the worst without knowing the truth. But what she didn't realize was that leaving wouldn't end her suffering. Her troubles were far from over. The male corpers, Kunle, Femi, and Du, moved on with their lives, never once looking back at what they had done. Their service ended, and they left the village, returning to the city as if nothing had happened. They found jobs, made new friends, and continued life as usual. But fate had other plans. The first to fall was Kunle. He had just secured a promising job and was feeling confident about his future. Then, without warning, he was fired. His boss offered no explanation, just a simple instruction: leave. Stunned and confused, Kunle couldn't understand what went wrong. Next was Femi. One morning, he woke up feeling weak and unwell. At first, he brushed it off, but as days passed, his health deteriorated rapidly. No doctor could diagnose his illness, and no medicine could heal him. His body wasted away, leaving him frail and helpless. Then came Du's turn. Tragedy struck in the most devastating way. His entire family, his parents, his siblings, were killed in a horrific accident. The grief was unbearable, consuming him entirely. He had lost everything in an instant, and his life crumbled into despair. As the three men faced their downfalls, confusion filled their minds. Why was all of this happening to them? What had they done to deserve such misery? They didn't realize that the past was catching up with them. They had thought they could escape what they had done. But some sins demand justice, and justice always finds its way, or so they thought. But their misfortune was far from over. No matter what they did, their lives remained filled with suffering and loss, and they couldn't understand why. Desperation gnawed at them until they finally sought the wisdom of an old man named a seer known for his deep knowledge and mysterious powers. When they reached his home, their voices trembled as they spoke. "Why is this happening to us? What have we done to deserve such terrible misfortunes?" The old man listened in silence, his eyes sharp with understanding. After a long pause, he shook his head and met their anxious gazes. "This is not ordinary bad luck," he said gravely. "It is punishment for something you have done, something terrible. The spirits are angry with you." The men exchanged confused glances. "But what did we do?" they asked, their voices laced with panic. Aa's expression remained unreadable. His voice, calm but firm, carried an eerie weight. "Think back," he urged. "There is a girl, F. You wronged her, and now the spirits of her parents are demanding justice." Their breath caught in their throats. Their faces paled as a name they had long forgotten resurfaced. F. The seer's gaze darkened. "Your suffering is not random," he continued. "It is the result of your own cruelty. The spirits of F's parents refuse to rest until retribution has been served." At first, the men struggled to recall. "F?" they murmured, frowning in confusion. The name was distant, like a whisper from a past they had buried. Aa's voice sliced through the fog of their denial. "You betrayed her. You hurt her in her most vulnerable moment, and now the spirits will not rest until you pay the price." Suddenly, like a dam breaking, the memories came crashing back. The quiet, innocent girl who used to visit Cooper Val's house. The one they had deceived. The one they had violated. Their stomachs twisted with fear as the full weight of their actions settled upon them. They had forgotten F, but the spirits had not. "The spirits will not stop," Aa warned. "Not until justice is served. You must find F. Only she can release you from this suffering. Without her forgiveness, your torment will continue, and it will only get worse." A heavy silence followed. Their hearts pounded with terror. They had never considered the consequences of their actions, and now they were drowning in them. But where was F? Aa's piercing gaze bore into them. "Return to the village where it all began. Find her. Beg for her forgiveness. If you fail, you will never know peace." Panic gripped them. Would F even be willing to forgive them? Dread coiled in their chests, but they had no choice. If they wanted to escape their suffering, they had to return to the place where they had committed their greatest sin. With fear and guilt clawing at them, the men wasted no time. They set off for the village where their crimes had taken place, hoping to undo the curse that haunted them. As they arrived, everything looked the same. Dusty roads, old huts, the distant laughter of playing children. But something felt different. The air was thick, heavy, as if the very earth beneath their feet carried the memory of what they had done. Their nerves tightened as they began asking around, stopping villagers and searching for any trace of F. "Do you remember F?" they asked. "The girl who used to visit Cooper Val?" Their voices wavered with desperation. At the mention of her name, the villagers' expressions shifted. Their eyes darkened, filled with memories they had long tried to forget. "Ah, F," an elderly man murmured, shaking his head. "That poor girl." The men leaned in, hopeful for answers. "Where is she?" The response was the same wherever they asked. "She left," they were told. "She disappeared after what happened. No one has seen her since." Whispers of the past drifted through the air. The villagers remembered the scandal, the rumors that had spread like wildfire. How people had whispered that F had been with all the Corpers. How her reputation had been destroyed. How she had suffered in silence. But no one knew where she had gone. F had vanished, and with her, their only hope of redemption. The men's desperation deepened as they searched for someone, anyone, who might know where she had gone. But the village held no answers. Just as they were about to lose all hope, an old woman who lived near the Corpers' house stepped forward. She had been watching them from her doorstep, her sharp eyes following their every move. "You won't find her here," she said at last. The men rushed toward her, their hearts pounding. "Where did she go?" The old woman sighed. After the scandal, the whole village turned against her. People whispered. They judged. She couldn't bear it. She paused, as if recalling the moment. One day, she packed her things and left, just like that. No goodbyes, no explanations. She disappeared. The men's faces fell. Their guilt deepened, pressing into them like a weight they could never lift. They had come hoping to make things right. But F was gone, and now they might never be able to undo what they had done. "Do you know where she went?" one of them finally asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The old woman shook her head slowly. She told no one. The men felt as if all hope had slipped through their fingers, like a shadow dissolving into the night. Defeated and heartbroken, they left the village with nothing but regret, their spirits crushed under the weight of their past sins. With nowhere else to turn, they returned to the seer, their faces pale and their hearts burdened with guilt. The old man listened to their tale and shook his head gravely. "You cannot abandon your search," he said firmly. "The spirits will not rest until Fae grants you forgiveness. If she is no longer in the village, then you must look elsewhere." The men exchanged anxious glances. Where could they possibly search? Fae could be anywhere, lost in a world beyond their reach. Desperation threatened to consume them until the seer spoke again, offering a thread of hope. "Think carefully," he said, his voice slow and deliberate. Was there anyone close to her? A friend? A protector? Someone who might know where she went? A sudden realization struck them like a lightning bolt. Corper Val Kunley's breath hitched as he spoke. Val was always by her side. He cared about her more than anyone. If anyone knows where she is, it's him. Memories of their time in the village resurfaced. Unlike the rest of them, who had been blinded by their own selfish desires, Val had genuinely cared for Fae. He had helped her study, encouraged her dreams, and protected her in ways they never had. Some of the Corpers had even whispered that Val had feelings for her. If there was any chance of finding Fae, he was their last hope. Without wasting a moment, they set out to find him, praying he held the key to Fae's whereabouts. Their journey led them to the city where Val had settled. After his service, they followed every lead, knocking on doors and asking questions, until at last they found themselves standing at his doorstep. Their hearts pounded as they knocked. When the door finally opened, there stood Val. Time had aged him, but his face was still unmistakable. The moment his eyes landed on them, surprise flickered across his features, but before he could speak, the men fell to their knees. "Please, Val," Kunley choked out, his voice raw with emotion. "We've done something terrible, something unforgivable. We need to find Fi and beg for her forgiveness, or we will be doomed. Val's expression darkened. A storm brewed in his eyes. I always suspected something happened to her, he murmured, his voice laced with both sorrow and fury. But hearing it from you, it makes me sick. Shame washed over the men as they bowed their heads, their guilt weighing heavier than ever. We know, Femi whispered, his voice barely audible. And we've suffered for it every single day. Please, if you know where she is, help us. We'll do anything to make this right. For a long moment, Val said nothing. His eyes burned with a mix of anger and pity. Then, with a deep sigh, he stepped aside. Come in, he said. There's something you need to see. Trembling, the men followed him inside. And what they saw next stole the breath from their lungs. Sitting quietly in the corner, her face calm yet distant, was Fi. But she was no longer the girl they remembered. She was heavily pregnant. The sight of her sent a jolt of horror through them. Their mouths went dry, their bodies frozen in place. Val's expression hardened. You did this to her, he said, his voice deadly quiet. The men collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down their faces. Fi! Kunle sobbed, his voice cracked with remorse. We didn't know. We never thought it would lead to this. We've been cursed ever since. The seer told us only you can break this suffering. Please, forgive us. Silence filled the room. Fi remained still, her gaze locked on the floor. The weight of their pleas hung in the air, but she refused to look at them. Then at last she spoke, and her voice was like ice. You think you deserve forgiveness? She asked, her words sharp as a blade. You destroyed my life, you stole my peace, and now you come here, begging for mercy. A crushing silence fell over the room. The men felt their hearts sink. They knew they didn't deserve her forgiveness. But they had no choice. This curse would consume them if she refused. Val, who had been fuming with rage, softened as he looked at Fi. He saw the pain she had carried, the burden she had borne alone. Fi, he said gently, I know they don't deserve it. What they did was unforgivable, but carrying this pain forever, it will only hurt you more. Letting go will give you peace. Fi's hands clenched around her belly. She had lived with her suffering for so long, running, hiding, changing herself just to escape it. Could she ever forgive them? Could she ever let go? The answer would change everything. Faye finally spoke, her voice steady, yet laced with unshaken resolve. I will forgive you, she said, her piercing gaze locking onto the men. But there is a price. The men lifted their heads, hope flickering in their tear-filled eyes. Anything, Femi whispered, desperation thick in his voice. We'll accept anything. Fi's expression remained cold, unyielding. I forgive you, she repeated. But none of you will ever have children. That is the price of my forgiveness. You will never know what it means to be a parent, to love a child, to care for a life the way you stole mine. A heavy silence filled the room. The men stared at her, stunned, the weight of her words crushing them. But there was no room for protest. They had no right to question her terms. Tears spilled down their faces as they bowed their heads in acceptance. Thank you, Kunle choked out, his voice broken. Thank you for showing us mercy. By Fi's side, Val stood in quiet contemplation. His heart was burdened with sorrow, but also relief. Relief that Fi had chosen to move forward. The men left his home, their spirits heavy with regret. Though they had been granted forgiveness, the consequences of their actions would haunt them forever. In the months that followed, Fi gave birth to a beautiful child. Val was by her side, supporting her at every step, ensuring she never felt alone again. With his encouragement, she returned to school, determined to reclaim her future. She worked tirelessly, pushing through the pain and hardship, refusing to let her past define her, and in the end, she succeeded. Fi became the banker she had always dreamed of being, proving to the world, and most importantly, to herself, that she was more than the suffering she had endured. By her side, Val remained unwavering, standing beside her as they built a new life together, one rooted in love, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. As for the men, they carried their punishment with them for the rest of their days. Though they had been forgiven, they would never experience the joy of fatherhood, never hear a child call them father, never feel the unconditional love of a son or daughter. T was a burden they would bear forever, a reminder of the price of their wickedness. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like the video. Tell us in the comments what lesson you learned from this story, and be sure to subscribe for more captivating stories like this one. Thank you for watching.